You know how people say, it's just a job, don't take it personally. Yeah. Well, tell that to the woman who had to reschedule 3 root canals because a clownfish hijacked the office aquarium and emotionally destabilized an entire dental practice. Hi, I'm Sheila. Receptionist, scheduler, phone answerer, occasional dental hygienist when things go sideways, which they often do. Because my boss, Dr. Philip Sherman. DDS is the kind of man who thinks an emotional support aquarium is a substitute for an actual therapist. I didn't go to college for this. Okay, I didn't go to college at all, but I did take a 6-week certification course in front desk leadership and power posing at the local Marriott Conference Center. And I nailed it. I'm good at my job. I organize chaos. I make stale coffee feel empowering. I keep the system running. Until he showed up. That fish. That demonic orange fish with the twitchy fin and the audacity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the Monday that ruined my life. It started like every other day late. I woke up at 8:07 a.m. Panicked. Choked on a Tic Tac I'd apparently fallen asleep with, and speed brushed my teeth with something that was probably moisturizer. My cat, Clarice, watched me from the edge of the sink like I was an evolutionary mistake. I got to the office at 8:31 a.m. Technically, we open at 8:30, but Dr. Sherman was already there, fiddling with the tank. Again, morning, Sheila, he chirped, like a man who hadn't left wet flipper prints across the carpet. What is that? Is that a jellyfish? I asked, pointing to the translucent blob now sharing tank space with the usual suspects, 1 royal gramma, 2 shrimp that only fight, and a starfish that looks like it's seen war. No, that's a moonfish, he said proudly. Got him in a trade. This guy in Queensland mailed him over. Long story. Illegal story, I muttered. But I let it go. I had more pressing issues. Our 9:00 a.m. appointment, Mrs. Greenberg, 3 fillings and a deep emotional attachment to her molars, had already called twice, asking if we had Wi-Fi yet. We didn't, and I had 30 new voicemails. One from a man who just breathed heavily and whispered, root canal, like it was a threat. At 9:12 a.m., everything derailed. New guy in the tank, doctor, Sherman shouted from his office/fish zone. I peered in, ready to fake some level of interest. There he was, a little orange clownfish with 1 weird fin and the attitude of a guy who knows he's the main character. What's his name, I asked. Nemo, he said, grinning like he'd just won custody. Now, listen, I like animals. I adore cats. I once saved a turtle from a drainage pipe and made the local paper under the headline, Woman Coaxes Shelled Creature from Doom. But fish are fine. Fish are wet decorations. They swim, they poop, they die. That's the deal. But Nemo, he was watching me. I swear, that fish locked eyes with me like we had unfinished business from a past life. He tilted his little head and did this thing where he darted behind a rock and then peeped out like a tiny aquatic war criminal. Is it supposed to be doing that, I asked, tapping the glass. Don't tap the glass, Doctor, Sherman barked, like I'd just launched a torpedo. You'll scare him. Right, he'll be scared. I'm just the underpaid receptionist 2 espresso shots away from flipping the aquarium. By 10:00 The atmosphere in the office had shifted, subtly, wrongly. The tank was buzzing literally. The filter made this low groaning sound like a haunted dishwasher. And Nemo. He was organizing something. I'm not crazy. The other fish were acting weird. They'd huddle, then scatter. One of the shrimp kept waving its claw at me, like Morse code. The starfish, who we call Larry, was upside down for 2 hours. On purpose. I turned to Dr. Sherman. You sure that one's not rabid? Fish can't get rabies. Sheila, sounds like something Big Aquarium wants us to believe. At noon, I tried to heat up my lunch leftover mac and cheese I definitely oversalted in a rage spiral and found my Tupperware floating in the fish tank. Why, I began too loudly. Is my lunch in the aquarium? Dr. Sherman didn't even look up from his fish logbook. Nemo likes investigating objects. He seems curious about thermoplastics. He ate a pen cap an hour ago. It was unscented, and then came the first cancellation. Mrs. Greenberg's husband called and said she had developed a tooth-based premonition and wouldn't be coming in. My schedule was unraveling. The waiting room smelled like kelp. The printer jammed twice, and Nemo, he escaped. Yes, escaped. At exactly 1:23 p.m., during a routine crown fitting for Mr. Tenenbaum, a man who once asked if fluoride was a government tracking agent. There was a squishy splash, a slippery thwump, and then Nemo, flopping across the floor like a tiny orange defector. The chaos was immediate. I screamed! Mr. Tenenbaum screamed! Dr. Sherman dropped a dental pick into someone's open mouth. The fish flopped under the radiator, into the trash can, and finally landed in my purse. "Don't move," I shouted, like I was in a hostage movie. "The fish has made contact." Dr. Sherman, instead of helping, took a photo. He looked so adventurous. "He's in my bag, Phil." And that's when he wriggled out Nemo. Not Phil, and launched himself into the hallway and directly into the slipper of an elderly woman named Barb, who was just here to schedule a cleaning and possibly complain about fluoride socialism. Barb fainted. The fish fled, and I locked myself in the supply closet and ate expired gum until the paramedics left. That was Monday. The fish was recovered. The receptionist was not. And things were only going to get worse. Tuesday started with a dead snail and a live seagull. Not my usual combo. I arrived at the office 17 minutes early, which I consider punctual because I was holding a coffee in each hand, a granola bar between my teeth, and a bag of frozen peas on my neck from the tension headache that Nemo had personally engineered. I opened the door and was immediately greeted by the unmistakable smell of low-tide chaos. You know that smell. It's like someone tried to Febreze a crab. "Phil, excuse me. Dr. Sherman was already inside, barefoot for reasons I did not care to understand, feeding the fish and talking to them like they were his co-workers. "Good morning, my little aquatic angels," he chirped, shaking a plastic can of pellets like it was holy water. "Who wants breakfast? Who's a brave little dorsal fin daddy?" I had questions. So many questions. But I said nothing. Because if you speak too early in this office, you become involved in something deeply stupid. Instead, I beelined to the front desk, booted up the system which still ran on something I'm convinced was built by Atari, and tried not to notice the faint thump-thump sound coming from the aquarium. It wasn't the usual filter bubble. No, this was rhythmic, purposeful, suspiciously close to Morse code. And then I saw it, scribbled in black marker on a sticky note, stuck to the side of the tank. Nemo is not just a name. It's a prophecy. I stared at it. Then I stared at the fish. Nemo was watching me again. Eyes unblinking. His tiny gill flapped with menace. Or maybe that was just how gills work. But still, there was something behind those eyes. A history. A plan. "What is this?" I asked, pointing at the note. "Oh, he wrote that," Dr. Sherman said, as if that was an acceptable sentence. "Well, I wrote it for him, but he swam in a circle when I said it out loud. So I think he agrees." I blinked. "Phil." "Yes. Sheila. Do you think the fish is trying to—" I struggled for a non-litigious word. "Disrupt the office." Dr. Sherman just laughed. This carefree little giggle that sounded like a man who had never filed a tax return properly. "Nemo's adjusting just fine. A little spunky. Maybe. But harmless." "Right, harmless. Tell that to Mrs. Lopez, who came in at 9:15 for a cavity check and left after finding Nemo in her iced tea." Let me explain. Dr. Sherman has this thing about office hospitality, which is a generous way of saying he serves lukewarm beverages in mismatched mugs and thinks peppermints count as a snack. But sometimes he makes what he calls his aquarium-friendly iced tea, which is just weak chamomile with no sugar, served in a glass he swears has never had fish in it. He lied. He handed that very glass to Mrs. Lopez, and then she sipped it. And then she screamed, because floating inside was not just one of Nemo's scales, which I am pretty sure is a biohazard, but also my lip balm, which I'd lost the day before and somehow ended up in the tank. Why is my Burt's Bees in the tea? Phil. I shrieked, holding up the damp, peppermint-flavored husk of what used to be my emotional support balm. Dr. Sherman shrugged. Maybe the fish wanted moisture. I want a different life. That appointment canceled. The next patient, a 7-year-old named Marcus, refused to sit in the chair because Nemo kept doing aggressive tail flips every time the drill turned on. He said the fish was threatening him telepathically. I believe him. Then, just when I thought we might get through the day without another scene, the health inspector arrived. Yep, that health inspector. Tamara with the tight bun, clipboard of doom, and a moral vendetta against anyone who stores fish food near chewing gum. You again? She said, narrowing her eyes at me like I personally invented unsanitary behavior. We've implemented protocols. I lied. She asked. Nemo and I whispered. She didn't laugh. She never laughs. She walked straight to the tank, pulled out a pH strip, and stared at it like it had personally offended her. Why is the ammonia level this high? Because it's the only thing around here with standards. I said before I could stop myself. She scribbled something down. I think it was a fine or a hex. Then she leaned over and peered into the tank. What's that fish doing with a paperclip? I froze. What? He's dragging something. Is that a dental tool? Sure enough. Nemo was dragging a tiny dental mirror across the bottom of the tank, like he was preparing to perform rogue surgery. Oh God, I breathed. He's upgrading. Tamara narrowed her eyes. This tank violates 7 local ordinances. Only 7, I asked. Too tired to filter myself. And then Nemo launched himself against the glass, not just swimming. No, this was a lunge, a full-body slam like he was trying to escape or maybe start a coup. Is that normal behavior, she asked. Phil wandered over, chewing on a baby carrot. He's just spirited. He's about to unionize, I muttered. Tamara pulled out her phone and took a picture. This is going in the report. Is there a section for revolutionary fish activity? There is now. She left. The fish simmered. I considered changing my name and fleeing to the outback. By 4 Sora p.m. I'd lost track of how many patients had rescheduled, cried, or left with a strange feeling they couldn't explain. One even claimed the fish told her a secret through the tank glass, and she wasn't sure if it was medical advice or a warning. I believed her too. At 5:03 p.m., I went to grab my purse to leave. It was damp. Inside, a single clownfish scale. Just sitting there, like a threat, or a love letter, or both. That night, I didn't sleep. Because somewhere in that tank, behind those cartoonish eyes and polka-dot fins, Nemo was planning something, and I was starting to think he was winning. By Wednesday morning, I had reached what I like to call aquatic burnout. You know that stage in a job where your brain just gives up and starts floating 3 feet above your body. That's where I was, hovering somewhere between resignation and a full-on psychic detachment from reality. I wore sunglasses indoors. I drank cold brew from a dog bowl because all the mugs smelled like fish flakes. And I had officially stopped pretending to care when Dr. Sherman. Sorry. I forget he has a degree and teeth started playing whale noises in the lobby for ambiance. No one asked for whale ambiance. No one wants whale ambiance at 9:00 a.m. while waiting to get a molar drilled. But Phil said it calmed the shrimp. So now we live in a foghorn-filled nightmare. Anyway, Wednesday. It started with Barb. You remember Barb? The elderly woman who fainted on Monday after Nemo flopped into her slipper and jump-started her nervous system like a car battery to the toe. Yeah, she came back. With a vengeance. She rolled into the office wearing a visor, a neck brace, and a shirt that said, "I survived the fish incident." She'd made it herself. Iron-on letters. Glitter. A tiny angry clownfish emoji stitched over the breast pocket. I admired her commitment to pettiness. "I'm only here," she announced, loudly, "because my granddaughter needs her braces checked, not because I've forgiven anyone." "Totally fair," I said, offering her a sugar-free mint that was older than Nemo. Barb glared at the tank like it owed her rent. And Nemo, he glared right back. That fish knew. He remembered. There was a tension between them I can only describe as legally actionable. Now, I should mention that today was also Wildlife Wednesday, another one of Phil's ideas to attract local families. It involved discounted cleanings for kids under 10, a raffle for a free electric toothbrush, a volunteer animal handler named Kyle who brought a traveling terrarium of safe reptiles and ethically tired parrots. So the waiting room was packed. Kids everywhere. 2 snakes in boxes, a tortoise making a break for the coat rack, and Barb, sitting in the corner, humming Ave Maria like a threat. That's when everything fell apart. Nemo had, apparently, been busy overnight. At some point, probably after I left, he had managed to collect several items from the office. I'm talking a paperclip, my chewed-up pen, 3 decorative pebbles, the tiny toothbrush keychain from the prize box, and one of Kyle's crickets, which is how we discovered that Nemo had become a carnivore. "Is he supposed to be chewing that?" a kid asked, pointing to the twitching cricket leg still floating on the surface. Dr. Sherman peered into the tank. "Huh. Well, that's nature, I suppose." "That's murder," I muttered, clutching the prize box like it was a flotation device. The kids didn't mind. They were fascinated. They pressed their little snotty faces against the glass and screamed things like, "Do a flip and eat the big one." And Nemo performed. He swam loops. He smacked his tail dramatically against the glass. He positioned pebbles into a smiley face and then rearranged them into a skull. It was performance art. It was chaos. It was absolutely intentional. At one point, Kyle leaned over and whispered, "That fish is manifesting something dark." I said, "You brought a bearded dragon named Steven. Please don't lecture me about dark forces." And then Barb, sweet vengeful Barb, stood up slowly, cracked her knuckles, and said, "That's enough." She marched over to the tank, pulled a peppermint essential oil rollerball from her purse like it was a weapon, and began whispering incantations in Latin, or possibly just very intense old lady muttering. I couldn't tell. It had power either way. Nemo froze. The other fish scattered. The tank filter stopped bubbling. "I banish thee," Barb hissed. "Ma'am," I said, "please do not exercise the office fish." But it was too late. Barb dropped a peppermint into the tank. It fizzed. The water turned slightly cloudy. And Nemo, he went absolutely feral. He launched himself at the glass with such force the aquarium shook. Kyle's parrot screamed. A kid dropped their toothbrush and cried. Larry the starfish flipped over and faked his own death again. And then, crack! A long, spidery fracture zipped across the front of the tank. Is that I began. But Kyle screamed, "Evacuate the reptiles," and everyone panicked. Phil dropped his clipboard. The parrot escaped. The tortoise sprinted by tortoise standards. A child fell into the prize box and refused to come out. Barb, to her credit, didn't move. She stared down the fish like she was in the final act of a western, eyes narrow, wrinkled hands clenched, her visor glowing under the fluorescence like a holy artifact. The tank dripped, and then Phil yelled, "It's okay. I have a backup tank," like that was a normal thing for a dentist to say. It wasn't the backup tank. It turned out was a literal salad bowl he had pre-filled with tap water and glitter rocks from Michael's. He dumped Nemo in like he was a soup ingredient, covered it with a pasta strainer, and said, "Problem solved." I said nothing. Barb said nothing. Nemo swam to the edge of the bowl, lifted his fin, and gave me a look that said, "This isn't over." "Sheila, this is a warning." I nodded. I understood. After the crowd dispersed and the reptiles were reboxed and the parrot was coaxed out of the drop ceiling with a Ritz cracker, I sat down at my desk, looked at the busted tank, and said aloud, "I will not cry because of a fish." I cried anyway, and from his glitter rock prison, Nemo watched, planning his next move. So Thursday started with a Google search I immediately regretted. It was 6:42 a.m. I hadn't slept. I was lying on my couch with Clarice, my cat, judge of all things mortal, watching The Real Housewives of Perth on mute, and eating peanut butter straight out of the jar with a pen cap because I'd run out of spoons. Again, I typed, "Can fish perform psychological warfare? Do clownfish hold grudges? How to legally evict a sea creature from your life." And then, just for good measure, how to fake your own death using dental records asking for me. That last one might have set off something, because 2 hours later, when I arrived at the office, the Wi-Fi was mysteriously down, and my phone kept playing Whale Song. On its own. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe Nemo had breached the firewall. The tank was still cracked. Phil had wrapped it in duct tape and positive affirmations, and the salad bowl setup had become our new aquatic reality. Nemo looked smug, which is a weird thing for a fish. But trust me, you haven't seen smug until you've locked eyes with a clownfish who knows he broke Barb and lived to tell the tale. And yes, he was telling tales. Phil swore up and down that Nemo had started talking. Not in words, obviously, but in movements, patterns, messages, the kind of thing that makes you go, "Wow, this man probably shouldn't have a license to operate heavy machinery, let alone dental tools. Watch," he whispered to me, crouching beside the bowl like a cryptid. When I placed the green rock here, he dropped it in with dramatic flair. He swims counterclockwise twice and then nudges the fake treasure chest. Maybe because he's a fish. Phil! No, it's communication. He's been trying to warn me. About what, the stock market? About them. He didn't clarify who them was. He just adjusted his goggles. Yes, he was wearing goggles inside and scurried off to prepare for our first appointment, humming under the sea like a man barely clinging to reality. Now, listen. I'm used to weird. I've worked here for 6 years. I've seen a man floss with a Twizzler. I've seen someone propose in the exam chair she said no. I once found a ferret in the supply closet and nobody ever explained it. But this was different. This was the unraveling. Because that day we had children's group dental education, which, for the uninitiated, is code for bring in 25 sugar hyper second graders and teach them about plaque using hand puppets and lies. They arrived in a wave of backpacks, sticky fingers, and the kind of energy that could melt steel beams. The teacher was a woman named Ms. Shelley, who looked like she'd seen some things. Real things. Field trip things. "Just don't give them sugar," she said, tossing me a bag of apples like it was contraband. I nodded solemnly. "Do the apples contain Wi-Fi?" She didn't respond. The plan was simple. Phil would do the demo. I'd hand out stickers, and nobody would die. Enter the bowl incident. At some point, during the toothbrush dance. Tam, yes, it's real. Yes. There's choreography. One kid, let's call him Trevor because he looked like a Trevor, wandered behind the front desk and poked the salad bowl. "Is this soup?" he asked. "It's a highly dangerous aquatic environment," I replied. He poked again. Nemo flared his gills like a frilled lizard and did a tiny headbutt into the glass. Trevor giggled. "He's mad. He's always mad." "Why?" "Because I'm winning," I whispered. And honestly, I'm not sure why I said it like that. But it felt true. Then Trevor dunked an apple slice into the bowl. I screamed. Phil screamed. Nemo bit the apple and refused to let go. That's right, he latched on. The bowl tipped. Water spilled. Kids screamed. A puppet caught fire. Miss Shelley fainted. A snake left over from yesterday. We think slithered out of the vents and hissed something that sounded like, "Get out while you still can." It was mayhem. Absolute soggy chaos. And in the middle of it all, Nemo, clutching that apple slice like a trophy, floating victoriously in the tiny puddle left in the bowl, making eye contact with me, smiling. We canceled all appointments that afternoon. Phil tried to salvage the moment by giving an impromptu seminar titled Why Fish Are Our Friends, and also maybe psychic. 3 kids cried. 1 converted to veganism. I just sat in the corner, holding a towel and my last thread of sanity. That night, I went home, opened a bottle of wine, and poured it into a cereal bowl because Nemo had ruined all my glasses. Clarice leapt onto the table, stared at me for a solid minute, and then knocked over my phone. It opened Google. First result: clownfish behavior signs of dominance and spiritual possession. I stared. I clicked, and the page refused to load. It just flashed red and played the sound of bubbles. The same sound from the tank. The same sound Nemo makes when he's planning something. I threw the phone in the sink, and then, through my kitchen window, I swear I saw a tiny orange flicker in the gutter. It blinked, and vanished. I didn't sleep that night either, because Nemo wasn't just a fish. Nemo was a threat, and he had access to my dental files. Friday, the end of days. The final frontier of my dental employment and, quite possibly, my psychological stability. I woke up with a sore throat, a phantom fever, and a genuine belief that if I entered that office again, my soul would be converted into fish food. So I did the rational thing. I called in sick. I even added a cough for dramatic effect. A wet, raspy one that sounded like a haunted radiator. Oscar-worthy. Phil didn't answer. Instead, I got a voicemail. Only it wasn't a voicemail. It was the sound of bubbles, and then a faint blub, 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 followed by a click. No words. No Phil. Just wet ambiance and the feeling that someone or some fish had just screened my call and judged me unworthy. I hung up. Tried again. This time. The phone rang once, and then played Under the Sea at half speed, like it had been slowed down for emotional impact. I swear I heard a fin slap the receiver. I screamed into a pillow. Clarice stared at me like, "Girl, just quit. Work at PetSmart. Live your truth." But I couldn't. I had bills. I had dental insurance. I had an unpaid gym membership I was too afraid to cancel in person. So I got dressed, reheated a Pop-Tart with a lighter, and trudged to the office. I got there at 9:08, prepared to fake a limp, a cough, maybe even temporary blindness, anything to stay away from that bowl. And the moment I walked in, Phil greeted me in a wetsuit. Head to toe, neoprene, complete with flippers, inside, on carpet, in an office. New dress code, I asked, dropping my bag and what was left of my will to live. "It's for empathy," he said cheerfully, waving a snorkel like a wand. "I'm trying to connect with Nemo, become one with his environment. You're going to get ringworm." He smiled. "Sheila, Nemo has been communicating." He rearranged the gravel into letters. I blinked. What did it say? He pulled out a Polaroid. The gravel said, "No cleaning." "That's a threat," I said. Phil beamed. "I think it's a boundary." No, that's how fish issue ultimatums. Sure enough, the bowl was cloudy, a toxic little soup of resentment and half-eaten apple pulp. I went to grab the net to clean it out, and the moment my hand hovered above the bowl, Nemo launched upward. He splashed me in the face. Direct hit, right in the eyeball. It was like being baptized by Satan's guppy. I recoiled. "He has aim!" Phil dabbed my face with a tissue. "It's just water." "Sheila, that's what they said about Chernobyl." From there, things somehow got weirder. At 10:15, a delivery arrived. A giant, unmarked box addressed to Dr. Sherman. Care of the chosen fish. It was filled with 400 mini-foam clownfish. All identical, all staring up at me like disciples. "Who ordered this?" I asked. Phil just pointed at the bowl. He's building a movement. I considered smashing the box. The fish. My own forehead. But instead, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and screamed into the toilet paper roll like it was a cone of despair. When I came back, they were chanting. Okay, not chanting, but Phil had put on a whale call playlist again and was making the kids from the 11 Ozo AM field trip hum in harmony around the bowl to strengthen the psychic bond. One kid asked if Nemo could grant wishes. Another offered him a gummy worm. A third asked if he could join the fish cult. "I'm calling the health department," I shouted. Phil placed a foam clownfish gently into my hands. "Sheila, you're missing the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that we're all going to get salmonella from a sentient shrimp, and I'll be the first one interrogated when this ends up on Dateline." And then came the final straw. At 12:23 p.m., a man walked in. Tall, sunglasses indoors, clipboard, government energy. "Hello," he said. "I'm from the Department of Aquatic Affairs." Phil gasped like he was meeting Beyoncé. "I heard there's been activity," the man said, glancing at the bowl. I leaned in. "Is this about the Wi-Fi? Because I think the fish is tapping into our router. My Keurig won't stop brewing salt water." He ignored me, stepped up to the bowl, peered inside, and then he saluted. "Nemo did a little loop." The man nodded. "It's true. He's awakened." "Awakened," what I cried. "The cycle," the man whispered. "It begins." He handed Phil a card and walked out. Didn't even close the door. The card just said, "Project Reef Mind Phase 1, confirmed." Phil turned to me, eyes wide with joy and/or madness. "Isn't this amazing?" I grabbed my purse. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm going on break. It's noon. My soul is on break, Phil." He held up a foam clownfish like a sad little peace offering. "You're a part of this too." I stepped outside, flipped the sign to closed, and whispered, "Not anymore." But behind me, through the glass, Nemo stared. He didn't blink. He didn't swim. He just hovered, and I knew deep in my bones, in the part of me that used to believe in normalcy and stable employment, this wasn't over. This was war. By Saturday, I had accepted two things. I was never getting my security deposit back. I was now canonically the antagonist in a fish-themed cult saga. I walked into the office carrying a tall coffee, a croissant I intended to emotionally devour in the supply closet, and a growing sense that Nemo was somehow editing my memories. I could no longer recall life before the tank. Did I have hobbies? Friends. A personality not entirely shaped by clownfish-induced trauma? Unclear. What was clear, the office had changed. Someone, probably Phil, possibly the fish, had redecorated. The front desk was now covered in tiny hand-painted signs that read things like, "Nemo sees you. All hail the fin. The bowl is watching. Ask about our new patient special and the prophecy." And right behind the reception window, mounted where our certificate of sterility used to be, was a poster board reading, "Welcome to the Church of the Rising Gill." It had glitter. It had pipe cleaners. It had Phil's handwriting. Phil, I called. Slowly backing away from what appeared to be a baptismal font made from a rinsed-out rinse cup holder, he popped out of the break room, wearing a tie-dye lab coat and what I swear were scuba goggles bedazzled with seashells. "Sheila, you made it. We weren't sure if you'd convert." Convert to what? Phil aquarium-based spirituality. Dental dystopia. He beamed. Faith and fluoride. I held up my croissant like it was a cross to ward off evil. If this fish gets his own merch line before I get a raise, I'm feeding him to a pelican. Phil didn't even flinch. He handed me a foam clownfish stress toy. We're calling them Nemo Nuggets. We made 400. They're scented. They smell like betrayal. Now here's the thing. I would have walked out. I should have walked out. But I stayed, because deep down, I was curious, not about the fish, not about the rising gill, but about how much worse it could possibly get. Answer: so much. At 10 Hozard a.m., a family arrived. Mother, father, 2 kids, all wearing matching shirts that said, "Team Nemo, believe in the bubble." They weren't even scheduled. They were just there. Pilgrims. "I saw the TikTok," the dad said reverently. "What TikTok?" I asked, dreading the answer. He showed me. It had 2.3 million views. The caption, "Dentist fish predicts fillings. Might be aquatic profit." There was Phil, whispering to the bowl. There was Nemo, swimming in a perfect figure eight around a model molar. There was me, in the background, mouthing "I hate this job" while trying to fix the jammed printer with my foot. The top comment. The receptionist has dark energy. She doesn't understand the bowl's message. Dark energy? I was being review-bombed by fish disciples. The next family came in with offerings, actual offerings. A goldfish in a glass jar. A crocheted fish hat. A locket with a fin drawn inside. One girl handed me a drawing. It was a stick figure version of Nemo, hovering above the earth, shooting rainbow beams at children with bad oral hygiene. She called it tooth rapture. By noon, the waiting room looked like a saltwater shrine. Someone had lit a candle. Someone else had started humming the Jaws theme, but in reverse. A toddler was bowing to the bowl, and Nemo, oh, he loved it. He spun, he twirled, he made bubble rings and did little hops against the glass like he was soaking in the admiration. "Don't encourage him," I muttered. Phil leaned over. "It's not encouragement. It's destiny." I snapped. "Phil, it's a fish, not a philosopher, not a messiah. He is not the guild reincarnation of aquatic Socrates." He rearranged the gravel into a smiley face and the word, truth. That could just be a fluke. He doesn't have a fluke. That's a tailfin. "Don't you marine biology-splain me." Phil, at that moment, a bell rang. Not our bell, not the front desk bell, no. Someone had brought a ceremonial triangle and was using it to announce sacred hour. I looked. A woman in a flowing shawl had set up a donation jar labeled "Gill Tithes for the coming current." I nearly blacked out. I stumbled into the staff room and locked the door behind me. I needed a break, a moment, a safe space. Instead, I found the following taped to the inside of the mini fridge. A fisheye sticker, a schedule of upcoming tank sermons, and a post-it that said, "Sheila, please bring more crackers. He likes the round ones." I screamed into a box of latex gloves. When I came back out, the crowd had doubled. There was a folding table, a prayer circle, and someone had brought a guitar. They were singing a song called "Blessed Be the Bowl." And then a new sign appeared. "Next week baptisms, tank access by donation only." I grabbed Phil by the collar of his shell-themed shirt and dragged him behind the desk. "Phil, listen to me very carefully. If this fish gets a 501c3 status before I get a dental plan that covers stress ulcers, I swear to Poseidon I will flush him, myself." Phil blinked. "Why are you resisting the current?" "I am the current." And then the fire alarm went off. Not because of actual fire. Because someone lit incense in the tank. In the tank, I had to evacuate the office. Again, as the fish followers filed out, murmuring about purification and trial by steam. I sat on the curb outside, clutching my croissant like a rosary. Nemo stared at me through the window, smug, glowing, like a tiny guild cult leader who knew I was losing, and the worst part, I think I was starting to believe him. Sunday. Yes. Sunday. The office is supposed to be closed on Sundays. It's in the employee manual. Right between "don't microwave tuna in the break room" and "if a patient says they've seen God during a cleaning, just smile and nod." But apparently, when your dentist becomes the spiritual representative for a bowl-bound aquatic messiah, policies become suggestions. I was in my bathrobe, deep conditioning my hair with expired yogurt, don't ask, when I got a text from Phil. "Big day, the bowl has spoken. Come early, wear blue. No punctuation. No context, just vibes." I tried to ignore it. I really did. I poured myself a bowl of cereal. I sat down. I opened a crossword puzzle and tried to focus on a 6-letter word for giving up control. Answer NEMO. So I showed up, not because I wanted to, but because I needed proof. I needed to document the madness, the corruption, the probable health code violations. If anyone ever asked, I wanted to be able to say, "Yes, Your Honor. I infiltrated the clownfish cult. But I did it for the truth. So I put on the only blue thing I owned, my old DMV polo with the logo scratched off by Clarice, and walked into the office prepared to be an undercover whistleblower. Reader, I was not prepared. The lobby had been transformed. The walls were draped in shimmery fabric. Blue lights glowed from behind the aquarium like an underwater rave. A fog machine puffed mist from behind the reception desk. Someone had installed a bubble machine. I repeat, a bubble machine. In the center of the room sat the bowl, elevated on a pedestal, surrounded by decorative coral, floating in the middle Nemo. Still, regal, suspiciously charismatic for a creature with no neck. The followers had grown. Not just kids and TikTok families anymore. Now we had yoga moms, retired scuba instructors, a man in a business suit holding a conch shell. One woman arrived wearing an inflatable fin and refused to answer to anything but Sister Splash. Phil greeted me wearing what I can only describe as a ceremonial wetsuit tuxedo. It had tails, literal neoprene tails. Sheila, he said, clapping my shoulders. You came. I'm here to monitor for OSHA violations. I said, perfect. You're just in time for bubble communion. And before I could protest, someone handed me a plastic champagne flute filled with lightly carbonated water and a single goldfish cracker floating on top. Take, sip, and crunch, they whispered reverently. I stared at it. Is this fish blessed? They nodded solemnly. Twice. I took a tiny sip, mostly out of peer pressure and mild dehydration. The cracker tasted like guilt and low-sodium prophecy. Then came the sermon. Phil stood in front of the bowl and began to speak. Brothers, sisters, and crustaceans welcome. Someone in the back yelled, All hail the bowl. Phil smiled. Today, we gather to hear the wisdom of the gill, the one who guides, the one who filters impurities from our lives and our aquariums. Applause, actual applause. I stood there, stunned, as he reached into the gravel and pulled out a tiny laminated scroll. Nemo has spoken, he declared. He says, beware the drain. The crowd gasped. Does that mean metaphorically, I asked? Phil looked at me like I'd just blasphemed in front of Poseidon. The bowl has many meanings. Sheila, I'm calling a plumber. Then came the ritual dancing. Yes, dancing. A group of followers in matching aquatic leotards began performing a choreography called the Whirlpool of Revelation. It involved interpretive swimming motions and a moment where everyone flopped to the ground and screamed, glub glub in unison. I clapped. I didn't mean to. My hands just betrayed me. Phil saw. Phil smiled. Phil announced, Sheila has accepted the current. I gasped. I did no such thing. A woman wearing shrimp earrings hugged me. Welcome, Sister Bubbles. That's not my name, but it was too late. They gave me a lanyard. It said Deacon of Reception and Towel Duty. I tried to give it back. But someone handed me a clipboard with a list of fish-themed hymns to alphabetize, and you know what I did it. Because my brain was melting, and if I didn't cling to basic tasks, I was going to throw myself into the tank and let Nemo judge my sins personally. By the end of the ceremony, 3 people had been bowl-dunked. Phil had announced the upcoming dental reawakening ceremony, and someone started a group chat called Nemo Knows. I left at 4:47, dazed, damp from the bubble machine, and clutching a plastic starfish that apparently represented inner molar peace. As I walked to my car, someone whispered, You were glorious today, Sister Bubbles. I didn't correct them. I got in, locked the doors, started the engine, and from my rear-view mirror, I could feel him watching. Nemo. The fish. The force. The founder. And worst of all, part of me kind of wanted to go back. Sucksome. Monday morning. The start of a new week. The dawn of a fresh hell. I walked into the office wearing my newly earned Deacon of Reception and Towel Duty lanyard. Not because I believed in the bowl or whatever, but because it was the only thing keeping the cultists from trying to baptize me with Poland Spring, Again, the lobby looked like someone had let a mermaid plan a Pinterest wedding in a dentist's office. There were bubbles projected onto the ceiling. Blue velvet cushions had been placed in the waiting area, each embroidered with the phrase, "Swim with purpose." Someone had crocheted a giant clownfish and mounted it above the fish tank like a holy relic. And yes, the fog machine was back. With vengeance. I hadn't even taken off my coat before Phil burst out of the supply closet holding a stack of printed pages and a look of pure, unfiltered awe. "Sheila," he breathed. "He's upgraded." "Who upgraded?" "Nemo! Upgraded?" "What?" "His medium." I blinked. "You mean like his social media presence?" "No," Phil whispered. "His communication strategy. He's using the printer now." He held up the top page. It was a printout of what appeared to be a Word doc filled with wingdings, dollar signs, the word "wet," and a small but perfectly formatted fish emoji. I stared at it. "You typed this," I said flatly. Phil shook his head. "The printer did it on its own. I was trying to run a referral form, and this came out instead." I snatched the next page. It said, "Do not bleach the bowl. Then we know who stirred the gravel." And finally, Sheila. I dropped the papers. "Nope." "Do you deny stirring the gravel?" Phil asked solemnly. Like this was a trial and not a workplace. "I was cleaning because this is a dental office and not a glorified shrine to a sea gremlin." The printer spat out one more page. It was just my name, in Comic Sans, slowly dissolving into a puddle of lowercase letters. "I think you've been marked," Phil whispered. I backed away, knocking over the hand sanitizer stand, but the real horror, Nemo saw it. He watched the whole thing from his bowl throne. Eyes narrowed, fins crossed, gravel forming a perfectly passive-aggressive spiral around him. I swear he winked. I marched to the back room and tried to unplug the printer. It hissed. The printer, CHISSED. Nope. Too much. I needed normalcy. I needed tasks. I grabbed the appointment clipboard and tried to confirm the afternoon's patients. That's when I noticed the names 2:10 p.m. Gillian Waters, 2:30 p.m. Finn Rodriguez, 3:00 p.m. Marina Deeps, 3:30 p.m. Current E. Flow. I stared at the list. "Phil," I said, "these aren't real people." Phil nodded solemnly. "They're chosen. Chosen by the bowl." "No," he said, "by the current." I screamed into the clipboard. And then, because reality is not a thing that respects boundaries anymore, the fish leapt out of the bowl, slapped my name tag with his face, and flopped back in. It happened in one fluid motion, like a trained assassin. A splash, a wet smacking noise, a glitter trail. Everyone gasped, even Sister Splash, who had up until then been meditating by the coat rack. "He touched you," someone whispered. "Yeah," I said, voice trembling, with his entire face. My name tag was now damp, bent, slightly glowing, possibly cursed. Phil leaned in. "This is the second sign." "Of what, the aquatic apocalypse?" Phil shook his head and pulled out the cult handbook. Oh yes, there's a handbook now. It has laminated tabs and a scented cover. He flipped to a page with a fish drawing and an annotated diagram of contact hierarchy. According to Section 3, when the chosen is face-slapped by the bowl-bearer, their spirit must complete a trial of purification and receive the scale. The scale. He opened a velvet-lined box. Inside a single Nemo scale, shiny and iridescent, glued to a pendant made of what I think was a retainer case. "Nope," I said, backing away. "I am not wearing a dead skin flake of my enemy around my neck like a trophy. This isn't Lord of the Rings: The Lost Sea chapter." Phil looked crushed. "You're resisting the path." "I am resisting everything about today." And then, just to top off the madness Sunday, the security cameras flickered, and the screen in the back hallway started glitching. Static, then bubbles, then a video feed from the tank, a fisheye view of the room from inside the bowl. I stared at the screen. "Is this live?" Phil nodded. "He's watching us watch him." Nemo swam closer to the camera, until all you could see was his face. Then, the video cut to black, and one line appeared in Comic Sans. Brush, or else. I left early that day. I needed a walk, a scream, a bottle of wine, and a podcast that didn't involve dental-based spiritual awakenings. But as I turned off the office lights, Nemo floated toward the glass. He pressed one fin against it, and I swear I heard a tiny sound. Just one word. Soon? I sprinted to my car and didn't stop until I hit a red light 3 towns over. The bull was gaining power, and I was no longer sure I'd make it out with all my teeth or my sanity. By Tuesday, I had cracked. Not emotionally, that happened somewhere around the time Nemo started printing prophetic dental threats. No, this was a different kind of crack. The kind where your spirit packs a tiny suitcase, leaves your body, and starts a new life working remotely from a cabin in the woods. I put on real pants, which should have been the first red flag, and marched into the office with one mission: end the fish cult. I didn't have a formal plan. Okay, this wasn't Mission Impossible. It was more like Mission Emotionally Unstable. But I had snacks, 2 cans of pepper spray, and a USB drive labeled Fish Secrets, exe that was mostly just blurry photos of Nemo mid-splash. I arrived at 8:57 a.m. The door was already open, not just unlocked, open, and inside, a choir. A real, full-on, organized choir, in robes, blue robes with tiny little fish embroidered over the hearts. They were harmonizing beautifully. I might add to a song called Cleanse Me, O Bowl Divine. I stood there, frozen in the entryway, clutching my pepper spray like it could defeat divine sonar. Phil turned around mid-verse, arms outstretched like a sea-themed televangelist. Sheila, welcome to the dawn of glisten. I beg your pardon? He gestured to a poster taped to the aquarium stand. Dawn of glisten, a 7-day cleanse of the soul and the tank. The schedule was printed beneath it. Day 1, gills of gratitude. Day 2, plaque of the past. Day 3, the sponging. Day 4, trials by toothpick. Day 5, scale confessionals. Day 6, whispered bubbles. Day 7, submersion. Day, bring your own towel. I am not participating in anything called the sponging, I said. You already did, Phil replied. What? Yesterday. You cleaned the windows. That counts. I was going to argue, but Sister Splash stepped forward holding a tambourine made of recycled dental floss containers and said, Sheila, your resistance is just fear dressed up as sarcasm. Great, I said. Tell fear to move aside. I've got plans. And here's where things went off the rails faster than usual. I unplugged the fog machine. Gasps. I turned off the bubble projector. Whales! I removed the poster that said, Nemo is my co-pilot. Absolute silence. Then Phil whispered, Sheila, what are you doing? I took a breath. A coup. I walked to the tank, still the stupid salad bowl, now upgraded with gold trim, and stood before it like Moses before the Red Sea. If the Red Sea had a Pinterest board and control over a man's credit score. Nemo, I said, we've had our differences. Mostly you attacking me with your body and/or spirit. But it's time we ended this. You're a fish. I'm a woman with chronic back pain. Let's go our separate ways. He floated to the front of the bowl. Dead center, face to face with me. And then he blinked. A single, slow, moist blink. Everyone gasped like it was the second coming of Sea Jesus. That's the third sign, whispered someone. What were the first 2? The gravel spell and the time he stopped the microwave with his mind. That was a power outage, Karen. But it was too late. The choir struck up a reprise of Rise, O Finn. Someone released confetti shaped like tiny molars, and Nemo began to twirl. Not swim, twirl. A slow, deliberate spin in place, surrounded by bubbles that seemed too perfect. I turned to the crowd. This is mass delusion. Fish don't spin with meaning. A child tugged on my sleeve. Are you the anti-gill? I stepped outside to scream, for real this time. Into the sky. When I came back, the tank was glowing, with soft LED lights. Yes, but still, The effect was there. Phil had installed speakers under the bowl. And now, every time Nemo moved, a soft choir of ahs echoed throughout the room like a sea-based Gregorian chant. You gave him a soundtrack. He earned a soundtrack. I lost it. I stood on a chair and screamed. He's a fish with performance anxiety and control issues. He once swallowed a paperclip out of spite. Then the printer turned on again. A single page printed. It said, "Let her try." I looked at Phil. "Let me try what?" He smiled. "The bowl is ready for your challenge." Oh God. The trial. They were doing the trial by toothpick early. Before I could object, someone placed a small dish of water before me, a toothbrush beside it, and a single plastic tooth from our dental model. I stared down at it. "You want me to brush this tooth?" "No," Phil said. "We want you to convince the bowl that you care." I stared at the bowl. Nemo stared back. "Fine," I muttered. "Let's dance." I picked up the toothbrush, dipped it, scrubbed the plastic molar with the determination of a woman who once used Windex on her own teeth during finals week. "Nemo swam closer!" The choir hummed in D minor. I finished. The lights flickered. Then a single fish scale drifted down from the bowl and landed in front of me. Everyone gasped. "She's been marked again. Twice chosen. Is this the prophecy of the double fin?" I stared at the scale. I picked it up, and, I swear to Poseidon's grandma, it was warm. I stood. "I accept." I said, like I was in a wedding or a really weird RPG. Phil stepped forward and handed me a new lanyard. High Priestess of Appointments. I took it, because at this point, I had nothing left to lose. Only one question remained. If I was in charge now? By Wednesday morning, I was officially a High Priestess. Not by choice, not through divine revelation, but because I made the mistake of brushing a plastic molar with conviction while 20 fish cultists hummed in harmony and a tiny sea goblin named Nemo stared into my soul like he was checking for cavities. I still had to open the office. I still had to confirm appointments. I still had to refill the complimentary floss basket that absolutely no one ever touched. But now I had a ceremonial sash. It was made of dental bibs and had a goldfish cracker glued to the front. I wore it. Why? Because every time I tried not to, something bad happened. On Monday, I forgot the sash, and the phone system played dolphin noises for 2 hours and refused to transfer calls. On Tuesday, I left it in my car, and every single stapler in the office jammed simultaneously. On Wednesday, I decided to wear it around my waist instead of across my chest, and the entire printer queue reprinted 47 copies of the phrase, "Know your place, Sheila." So yeah, I wore the sash, but I wasn't happy about it. That's why I decided to take a stand. A quiet one, a bureaucratic one. I tried to demote the fish, not spiritually, not legally, but on paper. I opened the office computer, logged into our internal filing system, which, by the way, still uses Internet Explorer and screams every time you try to download a PDF, and clicked into the patient notes. There it was, patient name, Nemo status founder. Living symbol. Co-manager of waiting room morale. Notes, cannot bill insurance. Maybe divine. Sensitive to temperature changes. I deleted co-manager. Then I tried to change his role to decorative aquatic asset non-speaking. The system froze, then the screen flashed. Once, then it turned blue, and a single line appeared in 24-point Comic Sans. "I see you." "Okay," I said aloud. "That's not ominous at all." I rebooted. The screen came back, all normal, except for one tiny thing. My browser history was printed and taped to the fish tank. I'm not kidding. There it was. For all the cultists to see. Can fish get demoted? How to gaslight a guppy? Do aquatic messiahs pay taxes? Is it legal to unplug a sentient fish if they print threats? Cheap therapy near me. I turned to Phil. "Did you do this?" Phil just stared at me like I'd kicked a seahorse. "Don't look at me," he said. "The bowl watches all." Someone gasped. Someone else dropped a prayer pebble. A child whispered. "She's questioning the current again." That's when I lost it. Okay, enough. I am done. I am not a fish nun. I am not a high priestess. I am a receptionist with a caffeine addiction and tendinitis, and I am one more bubble machine malfunction away from taking this entire aquarium to small claims court. Nemo flicked his tail. The tank bubbled. The lights dimmed. And then the iPad on the front desk turned on by itself. The voice of Siri, except slightly wetter, said, "Sheila, you will log today's appointments with reverence." Everyone in the lobby turned to me, even Barb, who had come back in full body armor made of Tupperware and was muttering something about fish-based fascism. I took a breath, walked over to the desk, and did the only thing I could do to reclaim control. I uninstalled the aquarium app. You'd think that would help, fix something, free me. Instead, the office printer, which wasn't connected to the internet, spit out 10 pages of ASCII art in the shape of my own face. I sat down, sipped my lukewarm coffee, and accepted that I no longer worked for a dentist. I worked for a fish with an IT department. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Phil emerged from the back wearing a cape. "I've received a vision," he said. "Nemo has decided. It's time for expansion." "What does that mean?" I asked, already regretting it. He unfurled a chart titled Phase 2 The Bowl Beyond. It included new location strip mall, dental temple near the DMV, official website www. Current conversion, orgy, tank-to-table cuisine partnership, weekly podcast Gill Talk, monthly mailers with fish-themed inspirational quotes like swim against the brush, and then my favorite part, employee roles. Phil Grand Bubbler, Sister, Splash Hydration Strategist, Kyle the Snake Guy, Aquatic Security Advisor, Me Sheila, Vessel of Skepticism. "They're going to brand me," I whispered. Phil handed me a custom tumbler with a cartoon version of my face and the phrase "Ask me about doubt" printed in seafoam green. That's when I knew. The fish wasn't just running the office. The fish was franchising. I turned to the bowl. Nemo spun once, slowly, silently. The water shimmered like a threat. He knew I couldn't stop him. He had backup. He had believers. He had access to our Amazon Prime. And somewhere deep inside, I feared. I was starting to believe in him too. Thursday, I had a dream the night before that I was being chased down a hallway made of coral by a giant fish with my voice. When I turned around to scream, it handed me a clipboard and whispered, "You missed a 4:30 crown fitting." I woke up drenched in sweat and toothpaste. That morning, I put on a pair of sunglasses, packed a crisis lunch, 3 slices of cheese and a banana stuffed into a Ziploc, and walked into the office with one goal: resign. I had written it out the night before. A real letter. Typed, double-spaced, printed on dental letterhead. It read, "Dear Phil, I hereby resign from my position as receptionist, high priestess, and unwilling participant in all fish-based religious infrastructure. I have served honorably, but I can no longer ignore the spiritual burden of working under a guppy with delusions of grandeur. With all due respect and mild trauma, Sheila, P.S. The bubble machine smells like shrimp farts. Simple, clean, professional." I was ready. But then I opened the door and immediately walked into a fog of lavender-scented mist, because Phil had decided that Thursdays were for spiritual softening. The front desk was covered in sand dollars. The printer was wrapped in seaweed, and the phone was now answered by a recorded voice that said, "Thank you for calling the Office of the Divine Finn. If you are seeking enlightenment, press 1. If you are here for a cleaning, press 2. If you are the FDA, this is a prank." I stepped over a small decorative tide pool someone had made from a dog bowl and blue jello, and found Phil standing in front of the tank, holding what appeared to be a glowing fish egg. "Good morning, Grand Heretic," he said with a smile. "That's not even insulting anymore," I replied. "It just sounds cool." He held out the egg. "This is a gift," he said, "from Nemo. It's an Easter decoration from Michael's. It's a symbol. Sheila, yes. So is the middle finger I'm currently giving you in my heart." But he wasn't rattled. Today, he said, is your ascension. I blinked. My what now? You've been chosen, he said. By the bull. The signs are clear. You mean the time he splashed in the shape of my credit score? Yes. The time the printer said embrace the tide or perish? Affirmative. The time I sneezed and everyone shouted, baptism. You were glowing. Sheila. I had a cold, Phil, but it didn't matter. The crowd was already assembling. Barb was there, now dressed entirely in a blue poncho with "Repent" before the flush painted on the back. Sister Splash had braided her hair into the shape of a kelp forest. A man in a snorkel suit was playing Enya on a waterproof speaker. Welcome, Phil said, raising his arms, to the coronation of the Fino-inted. That's when I saw it. The throne. It was a dentist's chair covered in shimmering cloth, seashell garland, and what I'm 85% sure was a tuna can halo. They sat me down. I tried to resist. I really did. But the chair had heat settings and lumbar support and... Listen, it had been a long week. Phil knelt. Sister Splash approached with a toothbrush scepter. The choir hummed, and then Nemo leapt. He jumped from his bowl, smacked me square on the forehead, and landed back in the water like it was choreographed. Gasps. Then applause. Then chanting. Fin, 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 Phil whispered. It is done. You are the fish pope now. I am not the fish pope, I said, panicking. You are, he insisted, gently pinning a name tag to my shirt. It read, Sheila, Supreme Oral Oracle. Dental and spiritual insurance accepted. Take this, Sister Splash said, handing me a microphone shaped like a conch shell. You must deliver the message. I don't have a message. Yes, you do. And here's the thing. I did. It came out of me like a wave. A salty, strange, righteous wave. I stood, lifted the conch, and said, brush twice a day, floss, and never trust a fish with an agenda. The room erupted. They loved it. Barb cried. Someone threw confetti made of ground-up oyster crackers. And me, I sat down, speechless, dizzy, because I'd finally hit the bottom of the ocean. And I had been crowned. That night, I went home. I took off the sash, poured myself a glass of wine, Googled religious maritime disassociation clauses, and when I looked out the window, there, on the lawn, were 12 tiny bowls, each with a single fish, each glowing softly in the moonlight. The bowl had multiplied, and I knew, deep in my shimmering, dental-coated heart, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the phenocracy. Friday, I'd been the fish pope for less than 24 hours, and already 2 people had offered me seafood as tribute. One woman tried to kiss my hand in the parking lot, and a man named Leonard emailed me asking if I would bless his koi pond via Zoom. Spoiler, I did not. I tried to quit again. I wrote a new letter. Dear Dr. Sherman, I respectfully abdicate my throne. I never asked to be Supreme Oral Oracle, nor do I feel spiritually equipped to lead a congregation of marine mammal enthusiasts, dental patients, and loose spiritualists wearing snorkel gear. P.S. Someone left sardines on my windshield. Please make it stop. Kind regards. Sheila, reluctant Pope Emerita. I printed it, folded it, slipped it into Phil's inbox. It spontaneously burst into glitter. Not a joke. Literal, fine-grade, craft store glitter erupted from the letter like the world's sparkliest booby trap. The inbox was now unusable, possibly haunted, definitely sticky. You can't resign, Phil said calmly, now fully committed to his aquatic archbishop aesthetic, which involved a cape made of shower curtains and a necklace made of floss picks. Says who I snapped? He didn't answer. Instead, he held up a tablet showing an online petition titled, Keep Sheila, Our Pope. She has the teeth of the people signatures, 3/428, including 2 verified dolphins. I was still processing that when the mayor called. Yes, the mayor of our town. A real, elected government person who wears suits and owns a ceremonial shovel for ribbon cuttings. Her assistant patched her through, and before I could even say hello, she boomed. I'd like to schedule a blessing. The city council has voted. We're joining the bowl. Excuse me? We're rebranding the fountain in front of City Hall as a reflection pool of guild wisdom. We're adding kelp, maybe a live feed. I blinked. Ma'am, I am a receptionist. You are the finno-inted. I have plantar fasciitis and a dead printer. I've already ordered custom ceremonial swim caps. You're expected at 2 p. 1. Wear something sacred. Click. I hung up and stared at the phone, like it had just insulted my mother. Phil clapped from across the room. The prophecy unfolds. I was losing control. Fast. Barb entered next, pushing a wagon full of what looked like fish-themed baby clothes. I made these for the newborns, she said proudly. We call them guppy gowns. They're embroidered with the first words of the bowl. What were the first words again? Wet but knowing. I screamed internally. By noon, a line had formed outside the office. Not for cleanings, not for fluoride treatments. No, these people wanted to be baptized. Inside a glorified salad bowl, Nemo was basking in it, floating regally, flicking his fin like a monarch waving to the masses. He had recently acquired a small gold ring, probably from the prize box that he now wore like a crown, balanced precariously over his dorsal ridge. Every time someone entered, he did a little spin. They swooned. A man in a suit got down on one knee and asked if he could name his daughter Nimwine. I watched from behind the reception desk with the cold clarity of someone on the verge of becoming a Twitter thread. That's when I decided to make a formal call. I picked up the emergency line. Not 911. I wasn't going to explain fish pope hysteria to an overworked dispatcher. No, I called my cousin Tanya, who works in city government. She answered on the first ring. Tanya, I need an evacuation. Of what? My life. I explained everything, the cult, the throne, the glowing fish bowls, the fog machine now emitting patchouli. I even mentioned the choir, who had, that morning, started rehearsing an original oratorio called The Book of Gills. Tanya paused, then said, Wait. Is this the place with the fish that correctly predicted the molar eruption rate in third graders? That was a coincidence. That was math. Oh my God, not you too. Sheila, sweetie, you're kind of a local hero. I'm a hostage. Well, then stop handing out baptism forms. I thought they were patient intake sheets. But it didn't matter. Word had spread. I had become a symbol. At 2 p.m., the mayor arrived, in a wetsuit, with a sash, and a fish-shaped umbrella. The ceremony began with 3 tambourines, 2 harmonicas, and someone shouting, "Let her swim for reasons I'll never emotionally understand." I was handed a sponge. I was handed a mic. And then, God help me, I blessed the fountain. I didn't mean to. I meant to say, please do not put live eels in a public water feature. But instead I said, may your reflections be deep, and your teeth be brushed. The mayor cried. Phil shouted, the oracle speaks. The fog machine hissed with approval. And me? I stood there, sponge in hand, crowned by circumstance, haunted by my own catchphrase. The press showed up, the local news. I gave an interview. I was tired. Okay, delirious. I said the words. We are all bowls, in a way. Some just hold more water than others. It was quoted, printed, memed. Someone made t-shirts. By the end of the day, I had a fan club, a citywide holiday proposal, and a request from a woman in Arizona to officiate her aquarium-themed vow renewal. I went home. I turned off all the lights. I opened a can of beans and sat in my bathtub, fully clothed, whispering, this is fine. This is normal. I am not the Pope of Fish. But in the distance, I heard the sound of distant bubbles and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of faith. Rising. Saturday, or as the cult now calls it, the day of stillness and silt. I hadn't agreed to this name. I hadn't agreed to any of it, but apparently, when you accidentally ascend to aquatic spiritual leadership via accidental molar baptism, consent becomes optional. I woke up to the sound of my doorbell, repeated, violent, like someone was playing whack-a-mole with divine urgency. It was Barb, wearing a velvet cloak and carrying a ceremonial ladle. We're late, she hissed. For what? The tank anointing. I'm not anointing anything before coffee and a bagel. She shoved a flyer in my face. Rite of Resurfacing, hosted by Supreme Oral Oracle. Sheila Tank Blessing begins promptly at 8:00 am. Casual nautical attire encouraged. Refreshments provided unsalted. Who made this, I asked. You did, she said, eyes sparkling. Barb. I have never in my life used the phrase resurfacing unless I was complaining about potholes. She leaned in. The bowl remembers, even when you don't. I closed the door. It opened again. On its own. This was it. I had reached my limit. I was done. I was ready to do what no fish cultist had ever dared. Destroy the tank. Now, I wasn't going to hurt Nemo. I'm not a monster. But I was going to desanctify that stupid bowl, remove the LED lights, unplug the bubble diffuser, and turn it back into what it always should have been, an overpriced decorative container for a nervous orange fish with a Napoleon complex. I arrived at the office wearing all black. Not for drama, okay. A little for drama, but mostly because it hides coffee stains and judgment. Phil wasn't there yet. The choir was late. Barb was busy blessing parking meters. It was the perfect time. I approached the bowl like a Mission Impossible scene. Unplugged the lights. Unhooked the fog machine. Replaced the golden gravel with normal rocks from a gas station planter. Took off the little cardboard crown and whispered, I'm not afraid of you. Nemo floated in the center. Silent. Still. Judging, I drained a third of the water, added neutral pH drops, put in a plastic diver figurine from a Happy Meal, replaced the tiny banner that said, All Hail, with one that read, Gill-less and loving it. I felt good. I felt powerful. I felt wet. Why? Because the tank had just exploded. It didn't crack. It didn't drip. It detonated like it was booby-trapped with divine vengeance. Water everywhere. My shoes soaked. My pants ruined. My dignity dissolved like bath salts in judgment. And Nemo? He flopped. Not pathetically. Majestically. Right onto the center of my clipboard, knocking off every single name tag except mine. He looked me dead in the eye. He flared his fin. And then the power went out. Total blackout. Alarms blared. The printer whirred to life. How? Printing a single page. You tried! The fog machine turned itself back on. Sister Splash ran in screaming. The Oracle is drenched. Phil came in right behind her, holding a bottle of fish-safe holy water and a waffle. He knew, Phil said solemnly. He knew you would betray the bowl. It wasn't betrayal. I stammered. Dripping. It was tough love. Phil leaned over and picked up the sopping Nemo with a ladle, placing him gently in a backup emergency tank labeled, In Case of Heretic. And then, because why not, he pulled out a megaphone and declared, Let it be known the fish pope has failed her trial. She must be reborn, anew, in the tank of truth. Everyone gasped. Someone in the back fainted. Barb began chanting. Phil held up a waterproof folder. It said, Emergency Ritual, Unter 12, Redunking and Emotional Realignment. No, I whispered. You are not baptizing me in public again. But it was too late. The choir began humming a new song, slow, mournful, dramatic, something that sounded like a Gregorian chant if it had been performed in a seafood restaurant restroom. And me, I was escorted to the fish tank like a soggy criminal, handed a loofah, and told to reflect on my sins. They called it the mellowing. I called it rock bottom. Literally, I tripped on one. The ritual lasted 15 minutes. There were bubbles. There were scented towels. There was a moment where Nemo spit a single air bubble into my forehead like a kiss from Poseidon. And then Phil announced, She has returned. Cleansed, drenched, enlightened. I was handed a fresh sash. This one read, Pope 2.0, now with humbled wisdom. I put it on, not because I believed, but because I was cold, soaking wet, and tired. So tired. As I dried off in the break room, Clarice, my cat, who had been smuggled in by Barb as an emotional support feline for the Oracle, leapt onto the table, stared at me like, Girl, really? and knocked over a fish-shaped incense burner. I sighed, looked out at the crowd forming in the lobby, and whispered, "I have to destroy the prophecy before it destroys me." But the tank hummed softly. Nemo floated calmly. And I knew. He heard me. Sunday, the day of fish rest. Supposedly. Except Nemo never rests. He plots. He bubbles. He waits. By now, the entire office had become something between a maritime monastery and a poorly funded aquarium-themed escape room. We had fish-shaped incense holders, ceremonial kelp fans, and a new app called Findare, where members could track bowl-related omens in their neighborhoods. It got 5 stars, of course. I was tired. Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and exfoliatively. Because as Pope 2.0, I was now expected to perform daily forehead salt scrubs as part of the gill cleansing protocol. I had just finished the scrub burned a little, smelled like old celery, and was sitting at my desk, staring at the tank, when Phil burst in holding a locked binder. "Sheila," he panted. "He wants you to read the logs." "What logs?" "The sacred tank logs. Volume Y." He placed the binder on the desk, reverently, like it contained the secrets of Atlantis. He says it's time. "Phil, if this is another one of your guided meditations where I close my eyes and you whisper things like, 'Feel the kelp,' I swear I'll file an HR complaint with the crab in the break room." Phil didn't laugh. He opened the binder, and inside were printed pages. Dozens, each one marked with dates, times, and phrases like 9/12. Oracle frowned at algae bloom. Spiritual fog intensified. 11:43. Bowl shivered. Pope Mobile Toyota Corolla passed inspection. 2:02 p.m. Sheila ate crackers near tank. Bowl does not recognize wheat. I stared. "Phil, who wrote these?" He looked around, leaned in close, and whispered, "He did." I blinked. "The fish," Phil nodded solemnly. "Through dreams, through visions." Through an old Bluetooth keyboard I hooked up near the filter. I flipped a few pages. There were illustrations. Tiny crayon doodles of me in various states of confusion, holding clipboards and questioning reality. One had a speech bubble that said, "Is this a cult?" and a note underneath that read, "Yes, but chill." I kept flipping. That's when I saw it. A page torn directly from my own journal. My personal journal? I know because I recognized my handwriting. And the dramatic underlining I use when I've spiraled past regular anxiety into what I call existential jazz mode, Tortteisnem. Day 43. I think the fish is trying to unionize. I woke up screaming the word plankton. If I disappear, know that it was the tank. The tank did it. The water remembers. My mouth dropped open. How did this get in here? Phil blinked. The bowl absorbs. The bowl listens. That was in my bedroom. The bowl reaches. I stood, slammed the binder shut. Okay. New rule. No more sentient aquarium espionage. Phil, unfazed, handed me a dry erase marker. Would you like to annotate the logs? I'd rather be tackled by sea cucumbers. Just then, Barb barged in carrying a large shopping bag. I brought new robes, she said proudly, made from reclaimed bath mats, very absorbent, ideal for holy splashings. I'm not putting on another robe, Barb. They have pockets. I took one. I'm not proud. As the day wore on, more followers arrived. One brought a child for spiritual molar assessment. Another dropped off a trout in a Tupperware container with a note. His name is Craig. He has seen the bowl in dreams. Phil updated the sacred tank logs in real time. At one point, the printer activated on its own and spat out a single page. Oracle needs snacks. I didn't even question it. I just grabbed pretzels. And then right before closing, I found the page. It had no date, no doodles, just a message typed in courier font. You've read too much. Sheila, you've seen the gravel? You know the current runs deeper? It's time, room 7. I turned to Phil. We don't have a room 7. Phil paled. We do now. We checked the hallway. There it was. A door that hadn't been there yesterday. Labeled 7 for those who doubted. I opened it slowly. Inside a dark room. A desk and a single tank. Empty, except for a miniature version of my desk inside it. With a tiny fish figurine. Wearing my sash. Phil whispered. He's preparing a successor. Is he cloning me? No, Phil said. Not yet. I slammed the door. That's it. I'm done. No more logs. No more rooms. No more fish rituals or mollusk-based metaphors. I'm not reading one more sentence written by a telepathic minnow with a god complex. The printer activated. Spat out one last page. A single sentence. Yes, you will. I ran! Not far. Just into the parking lot. I sat on the curb, robe-soaked, mascara-streaked, eating fish-shaped crackers in silence. The wind blew softly. In the distance, I could hear the choir rehearsing Psalm of the Bristletooth. And in my pocket, a tiny card with the words, Room 8, for those who try to escape. I swallowed and whispered to no one. I'm starting to think I work here forever. Monday. 3 months ago, I was a receptionist. Now I was wearing a ceremonial bib made of velvet, watching a clownfish announce his candidacy for local office via live stream from a glass bowl balanced on a podium. We had reached the end, or the beginning, or the horrifying, salt-flavored infinity spiral that happens when you stare too long into a tank and realize it's not just glass, it's God's eye, and it blinks on its own. Let me back up. I showed up to the office with one mission. Pull the plug. Metaphorically, emotionally, spiritually, and if necessary, electrically. No more rituals, no more incense, no more worship and whitening Wednesdays, no more children writing fan fiction about the bowl's mysterious origins and distributing it like gospel literature. I was going to take a hammer, walk up to that sacred tank, and introduce Nemo to a little-known concept called retirement. But when I arrived, he was already waiting. The lobby had been transformed. Again, now it resembled a campaign headquarters. Posters everywhere. Red, white, and blue streamers. A banner that read, Nemo 2024, strong fin, stronger values. A fishbowl on a podium. A tiny microphone. And Barb bless her apocalyptic heart, handing out pins that said, Fish the system. What is happening? I asked no one in particular. Phil popped out from behind a cardboard cutout of Nemo, wearing a top hat. Sheila, he beamed, you're just in time for the announcement. What announcement? He's running, Phil whispered, voice trembling with hope. For what fish president? For city council. I blacked out for 6 seconds. When I came to, Sister Splash was gently dabbing my forehead with a towel soaked in tank water and rose oil. He's got endorsements, she whispered. From who? 3 local school children, a mall kiosk psychic, and someone named Captain Brinybeard who might be a boat. The printer kicked on. Out came a press release. Nemo announces, candidacy for District 4 council seat. It's time to clean this tank, he declares, flicking gravel with purpose. I turned to Phil. Are you kidding me? He's serious, Phil said, adjusting his sash. He's got policies. Like what? He handed me a pamphlet titled, The Current We Deserve. Inside, bullet points. Mandatory flossing education in public schools. Ban on flushing fish without proper consent. Conversion of local pool into sacred soak zone. Dental benefits extended to aquatic citizens. Declaration of tank independence from the health department. I stared at it. Phil, he can't even sign a form. He doesn't need to. He whispered. The bowl signs through us. No. He has campaign music? No. He's polling ahead of Gary. Who is Gary? Our current city council representative? He's being beat by a fish. Phil nodded. Gary never hosted a miracle. I tried to unplug the tank. It was battery-powered. I tried to tip over the podium. It was bolted to the floor. I tried to shout, this is insane. But Barb blasted a foghorn labeled, Silence the Doubtful. Then live on Facebook, Instagram Live, and an underground fish-themed Discord server the campaign launch began. Phil held a press conference. He read statements. He thanked the sacred water. He introduced Nemo's running mate, a mollusk named Gloria, who has been comatose for 6 months and lives in a travel mug filled with cucumber water. The crowd cheered. They held signs, "Give peas a chance," unclear. "One nation under bowl," and "Make aquariums great again." Someone threw confetti made of crushed oyster crackers. I reached for the tank. Desperate! But Nemo swam forward, and I froze, because in that moment, he winked. A literal, deliberate wink. One eye, blink, power. And I knew I had already lost. The system was his. The voters were his. The bowl was inevitable. That night, I sat alone in the break room. Clarice curled up beside me. Calm, tired, covered in campaign stickers she didn't ask for. I scrolled through my phone. Trending on Twitter. Stervote Nemo. Voitapwis, Sheila. The skeptic. I was now officially the face of questionable faith. Fin the change. I took a sip of lukewarm tea, looked up at the glowing tank, and whispered, "Fine, run, win, flood the damn city with wisdom." The bowl bubbled gently. Approval. I picked up the campaign schedule. Tomorrow was the debate. Phil was moderating. Nemo was prepped. And me, I was in charge of refreshments. And destiny, because apparently I was now the campaign manager.